Knowledge and learning underpin the progress we make as individuals and as a society. When we know more, we can solve new problems and explore fresh possibilities. For hundreds of years, Oxford University Press has been committed to sharing the best in human thinking. From a child reading their very first words to a researcher expanding the frontiers of their field, we passionately believe in the transformative power of knowledge and learning to inspire progress and realize human potential. But the world is changing. When all information is at our fingertips, data needs understanding. As content crowds every screen, ideas need space to breathe. And when the next great thinker can come from anywhere, they need to be seen. So Oxford University Press is changing too. Whether we're making learning work for anyone, anywhere, anytime, connecting a global community of English language learners, or helping influential ideas achieve greatest impact, we will meet the needs of education and research in new ways, with new ideas, for new audiences. For as long as the world keeps making progress, we will always be advancing knowledge and learning. Oxford University Press. Advancing knowledge and learning.
안녕하세요. 이퍼블릭과 언어세상의 Teachers Day 이벤트 첫날 강의를 시청을 시작해 주셨습니다. 오늘은 옥스포드의 카이 선생님께서 강의를 준비해 주셨어요. 소개 좀 해주실까요?
우리 카이 선생님은요, 제가 너무너무 기대가 되는 선생님이세요. 왜냐면 옥스포드 교재 Phonics 월드를 직접 연구하시고 제작해 주신 저자분이세요. 이 저자분께서 직접 그 교재에 다양한 꿀팁들을 전수해 주신다고 해요. 우리 카이 선생님이 준비해 주신 주제가 첫 번째가 뭘까요?
아마도 Phonics를 하시는데 제가 이분 강의 열렬한 팬입니다. 액션을 많이 취해 주시는 서프라이즈가 많은 그런 강의인데요. 그럴까요?
네! 정답! 정답이세요. 우리 카이 선생님께서는요, Phonics in Action을 주제로 준비하셨다고 하세요. 그리고 소주제로는 Back to the Basics로 선생님들께서 직접 다양한 기본 토대를 쌓으실 수 있도록 다양한 꿀팁들을 준비하셨다고 합니다.
아무래도 Phonics를 티칭하시는 분들 고민 많으시고요. 처음 시작하시는 분들이신데 우리 지난 2년 넘는 기간 동안 굉장히 다들 힘들었습니다. 그런데 드디어 엔데믹 시점이 다가오면서 현장으로 나가 계시는 교사분들이 우리 아이들이 어떻게 하면 Phonics를 이전처럼 더 잘할 수 있게 이끌어 갈 수 있는지 유용한 팁을 알려주실 수 있을 것 같아요. 그럼 첫 번째 강의를 시청해 볼까요?
Hello everyone, welcome to Oxford University Press's webinar, Phonics in Action. I have some bad news unfortunately. The co-author of Oxford Phonics World, Kai Schwermer, could not make it today. So in his place is me. My name is Farmer Fred, and if you open the cover of Oxford Phonics World Book 2, you can see me right there on the inside, okay? So Kai Schwermer has almost 30 years experience as a teacher and as an author and a teacher trainer as well. I'm just a farmer. I don't know what I'm doing. So even though this is the recording, I'd like you to please be patient and help me as much as you can as we go. Okay? Here we go. So let's have a look at Oxford Phonics World, the series. First of all, there are 5 levels in Oxford Phonics Worlds. Okay, level 1 looks at the alphabet, 26 letters of the alphabet, the way that they're written, and most importantly, the sounds that they represent. And Book 2, which is the level we're going to look at today, blends the sounds and letters that are introduced in Book 1 into words. So if you look at this slide, you can see 26 letters on the left, and from level 1, and from level 2 on the right. Let's have a look at how this works exactly. Okay, right, so we use something called one-to-one correspondence. What does that mean exactly? It means one letter represents one sound, right? So if we look at the top, we have the letter I, N, and K, but they only represent one sound. So for example, E, N, K, or on the bottom, T, E, N. All right? And if we blend them from left to right, ink, or 10, that's reading. Okay, so all of the words that students are being asked to read and write in level 2 have a one-to-one correspondence, keeping it very, very simple. Only one letter representing one sound for all of the words that students are expected to read and write. Okay. Also, last year, a refresh of Oxford Phonics World was released, and some brand new, very fun apps have been created. We're going to have a look at these apps later on in this webinar. And the apps are available on Apple Store, App Store, or Google Play, or in China, the Android download for China. Okay. Again, we're going to have a look at these games and activities in the apps later on today. Now, finally, a brand new website at this URL has also been created, and on this website, if you go to this link, you can see you'll find a bunch of resources that you can use to print out and use in the classroom with your students. Okay. This is what the website for the School Edition app looks like. So if you run your own school or if you work for a school, you can have all of the students access the app through this website here as well. So lots of brand new, exciting digital resources with the Oxford Phonics World refresh. Okay, so now let's go into a lesson. All right, so the first question I'd like to ask is, how do you start your lessons? Right? Maybe some of you start your lessons with a song. Some of you start with kind of a warm-up activity, looking at the weather, day of the week, the date, things like that. Today, I'd like to recommend you start your lessons with a story, especially if you're doing a phonics lesson. Okay, so let's have a look at a story, and let's start a story time. Okay, so this is the first page of today's story. So there are a lot of things you could do here. You could ask students a question, for example, what can you see in this picture? Or you can ask them, how's the weather? It's raining. What can you see? I can see a girl and a hen. What's the hen doing? It's running. Look at the girl's face. How does she feel? Is she happy? Is she angry? Maybe she feels a little worried. How about the hen? Maybe the hen feels a little worried too. Why do you think so? Maybe because it's raining. The hen is running into the house. Oh no, what happened? What is wrong with the hen? That's right, the hen is sick. If you were the girl, what would you do? Oh, you'll take the hen to the doctor. What do we call a doctor for animals? A vet. That's right. Okay, so the hen is feeling much better now. All right, so we've kind of told the story together. And again, look here, we're not reading the story at all. There's no written text. We're just asking questions and doing this as a communicative storytelling activity. Okay, now we want to get to the ending of the story. So I'll ask the students, how does this story end? How do you think this story ends? Does it have a happy ending? A sad ending? What do you think? Let's have a look. Oh, to be continued. Okay, so we'll find out the ending to the story at the end of this unit. Okay. All right. So starting off a lesson with a story like that, like we just did, is very, very easy. Okay. And again, we can adjust the language according to the level of our students. We can turn it into a communicative activity. Again, no reading at this point. Okay. So our first point today is tell a story. All right. Start your lessons with a story. A lot of people think about phonics as kind of a bottom-up approach only, right? Looking at the individual sounds. But if you're starting with a story, you're looking at introducing literature and stories and whole language in oral form right from the very, very beginning. Okay, and then from here, we can go into an actual phonics lesson. So going back to the farm, what is this? It's an egg, that's right. But this egg is not a normal, everyday, ordinary egg. It's a special egg. It is an energetic egg. Can you say that? An energetic egg. All right. And let's have a look at this. So you can use a card and maybe hide what it is. Can you guess what this is? I'll move the card a little bit. Can you guess now? How many legs do you see? 4, that's right. Can you guess what it is? Yes, it's a gorilla. That's right. But this gorilla is not a normal everyday gorilla. It's a special gorilla. It is a good gorilla. Can you say that? A good gorilla. Can you be a good gorilla? Good gorilla. Wonderful. All right, let's do one more. Okay, again, you can use a card with a hole cut in. There's a variation of this activity. Can you guess what this is? Let's move the card around a little bit. Oh, how many legs can you see? And what I can see a bit of a wing as well, and maybe a tail. Let's move this. Oh, and a curly nose. Yes, this is an insect. All right, can you say that? An insect. Great. But this insect is not a normal everyday insect. It is an interesting insect. Can you say that? An interesting insect. Wonderful. Okay, the second point I'd like to introduce today is to create interest. The characters we just introduced are actually from level 1. There are 26 of them, one for each letter of the alphabet. And they're designed to engage students, create interest, and also help students establish a connection between the letters and the sounds that the letters represent. Okay? Another aspect that these characters help with is to create a multisensory aspect, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, or seeing, hearing, and doing. So, do you remember this character? This is the energetic egg, okay? And again, energetic egg and 25 other characters appear in level 1 to introduce the 26 letters of the alphabet and the sounds that they represent. I'll go into how that process works in another webinar, but for today we're going to focus on level 2. And as you can see here, this is an image from level 2, and that's me, Farmer Fred, holding the energetic egg. So each of the characters in level 1 appears again in level 2. All right? So the character's name is the energetic egg. What's the first sound in energetic and egg? Eh, that's right. Okay? And this was introduced in level 1, but this is reviewed and brought up again at the beginning of each unit in level 2. All right? And next, we can introduce some vocabulary. Let's read these together. Web, egg, vet, 10. And let's practice blending. Egg, from left to right. 10. Web, vet. And some writing practice after that. the students will write these together. And for an additional challenge, you can have the students cover the words so they're not just copying it, they're actually writing it by looking at the images on the left. Okay? And to practice some more, we can use the apps that I talked about at the beginning of this webinar. Let's have a look at one of the apps. Okay, so this is an activity here where the students, just using their finger, they can write in the app itself. Okay, right? Or we could use the workbook to do some additional practice as well. Here's a writing activity, matching activity, and writing activity in the workbook. Okay, so lots of practice. And if we look at the bottom of the page, we can see a sentence: the vet has 10 big eggs. If we look at the picture, we can see the vet has 10 big eggs. Okay. The next point I'd like to make is communication. A lot of people tend to think of phonics as being a bottom-up approach, just looking at sounds and words, but forget that actually we should be focusing on fluency right from the very, very beginning. As Paul Nation says, at every level of language proficiency, learners should try to be fluent with what they already know. Okay, so focusing on fluency from the very beginning all the way through. Okay, in Oxford Phonics World, we do this through the stories and through the chants. And the communicative targets are taken from other Oxford University Press titles, such as Let's Go or Everybody Up or English Time. Okay, so now let's look a little bit at what the research says about phonics instruction. Okay, so this is a report, Reading by 6, by Ofsted. So Ofsted is the Office for Standards in Education in the UK. Basically, they are responsible for maintaining standards and checking standards in schools across the UK. And their recommendation in this report was that every primary school teacher should be able to teach systematic synthetic phonics well. So what does that mean? Well, the next point I'd like to make is that the approach to teaching phonics is very important. A systematic phonics approach. What does that mean? Well, there are two main kinds of approaches to teaching phonics. A synthetic phonics approach, or also called linguistic phonics approach, and an analytic phonics approach. Okay, what does this mean? And basically, a synthetic phonics approach starts with the individual sound and synthesizes them or blends them into words, kind of like what we just did a little bit earlier when I was introducing the first unit in level 2. Okay, so what is an analytic phonics approach? Basically, an analytic phonics approach starts with the words and looks at patterns within the words. Okay, so Oxford Phonics World has a systematic synthetic phonics approach, but also looks at strengths of an analytic approach, and I'll show you examples of how that's done a little bit later on in today's webinar. Okay, but most importantly, an EFL approach is also needed, right? What does that mean? English as a foreign language. Okay, so our students are also, in addition to learning how to read and write, they're also learning English for the first time. Okay, so the vocabulary and grammar and communicative language that we're including in the book has to be designed, or ought to be designed, with this in mind. If we just import a program from the UK or from the US or other English-speaking countries, a lot of times the vocabulary and the grammar is much too difficult for EFL students. Okay, now let's have a look at how this works in the actual classroom. Right, so on the left we have a synthetic phonics approach. This is what we did earlier. So we have web, egg, vet, and 10. And in the next section of this unit, we would have an analytic phonics approach to practice just blending in that first initial consonant. So we have t, this pattern, et, and then again the pattern et, and just blending in j, et, jet. Okay, And you can see here, all of these words, all 4 words, have this et pattern. Okay, what's the advantage of this approach? A big advantage, especially here in Asia working with EFL students, is it allows them just to focus on blending in this initial consonant, which can be a big challenge for younger learners who are just starting to learn how to read. Right? So we just focus on blending in this first consonant, jet, net, wet, and pet. Okay? They don't have to worry about putting the whole word together. But we start off each unit with the synthetic phonics approach and then do further practice just blending in that initial consonant using an analytic phonics approach. Okay? So using strengths of both the synthetic and analytic phonics approaches. Okay, again, you can see it. Synthetic phonics approach, web, egg, vet, and 10. Synthesizing the individual sounds, blending them, and reading, decoding. Okay, analytic approach, t, it, j, et, jet. Just blending this in and having the same pattern for all 4 words like we have here. Okay. And let's look at another example. So we have n, n, h, n, and d, ed, ed, red. Okay. So you can see clearly the strengths of an analytic phonics approach, especially for students here in Asia, blending in that first initial consonant. Big challenge. Analytic approach really helps with that. And we can do some further practice, writing practice, okay, using different patterns. Okay, let's have a look at whole unit looks. So we start off with a synthetic, pure synthetic phonics approach, right? Different combinations, some writing practice and reading practice, some communication. Okay, an analytic approach. Again, some writing practice and reading practice. One more time. A chant with a communicative target. Reviewing everything. And then finally, looking at the story. Okay. Okay, let's look at this activity from the previous page. How can we make this activity a little more challenging for the students? So if you look at it closely, all the students have to do is copy the words from the top and down to the bottom. How can we make this more challenging? Okay, so we can make the activity more challenging by covering the written words with images of the words. Okay, so in this case, the students actually have to look at the word. So let's have a look at an example here. So we have net, and students from their own internal awareness or knowledge of what they've learned so far, they have to write the word here, net. Okay, and we can see here, this is actually a true writing activity, not just copying, right? And more importantly, we're getting the students to think a little bit. And most importantly, we can see right away whether or not the students understand or what their level of awareness and ability in reading and writing actually is by doing activities like this. Where do you get the images from? In the back of each student book, there are individual small student cards that students can cut out, you can laminate, and each student will have their own set of cards you can use in activities like this. Okay? All right, so the next point I'd like to make is the concept of a one-to-one correspondence. Okay? As I mentioned before, one sound, one letter. So all of the words at this stage that the students are asked to read and write have only a one-to-one correspondence, which means one letter represents only one sound. Okay, now let's look at some games and other activities you can use to practice and have fun with your students. Okay, let's have a look at some of the apps that I mentioned earlier. These apps are full of very, very interesting and fun games that you can use to have your students enjoy the process of learning to read and write. Okay, here's an example of a game where students just click on all of the words that have the et pattern in it. Okay, this game is a guessing game. So at the bottom we have some images, and at the top we have just the silhouette of an image. Can you guess what this is? Yes, that's right. It is a jet. Okay, right. Let's have a look at the next one. What is that? It is a net. That's right. And then we read the word at the bottom right here. Very good. Let's do one more. What is this? This image right here is a pet. Very good. Okay, next. This is from a previous unit. That's right. It's a bag. Okay, and how about this? This towel is very wet. And an animal doctor is a vet. Okay, fantastic. Let's look at another type of game. So in this case, the students drag the images up onto the silhouettes the other way around and then read. Let's look at an example. So we have pen. Pen appears here, and the students drag the pen up onto the silhouette. Okay. Another kind of activity. So this is the image, and the students drag the letters here, p, et, and read, pet. Okay. Another fun game, a bingo game, and here we're playing against the merry monkey. Okay, and against the time limit, a word will appear, nap, and we click on the words. If we have it, looks like we don't have it, but the monkey has it. And the first person to get 4 in a row wins. Okay, so these apps are full of games like this that really help your students enjoy the process of learning to read and write. Okay, now let's have a look at some games that you can play in the actual classroom now. The first game we're going to look at is called Touch. And this game is straight out of the Oxford Phonics World Teacher's Book. Okay, this is the teacher's book from Oxford Phonics World, and if you look on the right-hand side, you can see a list of games that are just ready to go. You just open the book, pick a game, look at the instructions, and play it with your students. No prep at all involved. So let's have a closer look at this game. Okay, so how do we play it? We use the N and ED student cards. Students play in groups of 5 or 6. Say the keywords, students repeat, and race to touch the cards. Okay, and have one student be the leader, repeat, so that each student gets a chance to be the leader and say touch. Fairly straightforward. But today we are using the internet, so we're going to do a variation of this game, and we're going to play this game together over the internet. All right, here we go. So I've got some cards set up on the table over here in the corner. So I'm going to say one of them, and I want you to reach through your camera and through the internet and touch the card that I say. Okay, the first one is net. Net. All right, reach through the internet, through your camera, and touch net. Fantastic. Very good. Great. All right, let's do one more. Bed. Reach through your camera and touch. Beds. Okay, fantastic. All right, so you get the idea. And then maybe you can have, if your students have audio as well, or you're playing through the internet, you can have students take turns saying words and everybody touches through the internet. Okay, great stuff. All right, so the next point I want to make is using the apps. So using apps to learn as you play and play as you learn. Okay. Let's have a little bit of a look now at the process of writing. So as I mentioned earlier, in the back of each student book are two-sided student cards that students can cut out. They're about this big, and cut and use in class or to practice at home. On one side is the image, and on the other side is the word itself. Okay, so these are really useful for basic practice. Okay, so we've looked at some games using the apps. We looked at some games online and using teachers' cards. You can do the same activities in class, but nothing really beats just using a blank piece of paper and a pencil and the student cards. You know, let me show you an example of how this would work. Okay, so you take maybe 4 to 8 student cards from a unit we've just studied, and have the students just place them at the top 1, 2, 3, 4 of their desk use a blank sheet of paper. Look at the one on the left. Okay, and then sound it out. Bed. And then write it. Bed. Then the next one. Red. Sound it out and write it. Pen. Write it. And finally, hen. Okay, and when students are finished, they can just turn the cards over and self-check whether or not they've written the words on their own. All right, so each student using their own student cards will have a different combination of words, and you as a teacher can just go around and work with individual students as they work independently. If a student finishes earlier, you can have them do 4 more. Okay, so this type of simple activity, just using the student cards, a pencil, and a blank piece of paper. Okay, so we've looked at blending, the process of blending. We've looked at how level 1 and 2 work together. We started off the unit reading a story together just orally. All right, we did some activities, reading and writing practice, blending. We played some games, and we can end the lesson now, or the unit now, with the story. And in this case, you can have the students read the story on their own. So the name of the story is My Pet Hen. All right, so I'm just going to sit back and let the students read the story on their own. In this case, you're my students, so I'll let you read the story on your own. The red hen is wet. Oh no, my pet hen is in bed. We go to the vet. What happens at the end? Can you read it? My hen has 10 eggs. Yes, it's a happy ending. Okay, so the final point I'd like to make today is the concept of not interfering. So we started off the lesson reading a story together just orally, okay? Leaving the ending, introduce the phonics, do some blending practice, some reading and writing practice, some communicative practice, doing some games, and more writing practice using the student cards. And at the end of the unit, the students themselves are reading the story on their own. So I'm getting out of the way and letting the students read the story and find out the ending to the story completely on their own. So this process of not knowing, learning the skills, mastering them, and then discovering the story at the end on their own is a very, very important process in each unit in Oxford Phonics Worlds. Okay? Not interfering. One of my mentors, Earl Stavik, the late Earl Stavik, this quote I really like that he wrote: teach, test, then get out of the way. And that's kind of what we're doing in each unit in Oxford Phonics Worlds. Okay? So we teach, we're going over the story in the beginning of each unit orally together, and we're teaching the phonics targets, having the students practice them through games, and at the very end, we get out of the way, not interfering. Let the students read the story and discover, oh, they can read it on their own at the end of each unit. Okay, so we are nearing the end of this webinar, and let's have a review of some of the main concepts that I've talked about today. The first one is an approach. And do you remember? What kind of approach are we aiming at? A systematic phonics approach, okay? And most importantly, aimed at EFL, students learning English as a foreign language. So the vocabulary, grammar, communicative targets in the course are all also aimed at students who are learning English as well as learning how to read and write English. Okay? Apps. The Oxford Phonics World Refresh. Exciting, fun apps that you can play on your iPhone, iPad, Android phone. Digital components, very, very interesting. Okay, so using apps to learn as you play and play as you learn. Next, do you remember this one? Communication. Okay, so including communicative targets in each unit and practicing fluency right from the very, very outset of the course. Okay, so we're not just looking at individual sounds and words, but we have a communicative context in each unit and in each story as well. Speaking of stories, the next point is tell a story. So starting off each unit by telling a story, just orally. Okay, no reading and writing in the beginning. Right? Create interest. So we introduced in level 1, 26 characters, each one representing one letter of the alphabet and the sound, common sound that represents. Okay, and drawing them in. So phonics doesn't have to be kind of boring and dry. These characters help create interest in that very, very first, really important stage of learning. All right, next, one-to-one correspondence. What does this mean? One sound to one letter. Okay, so we're not doing this and we're not doing this. This makes the apple angry. Okay, and we're definitely not doing this. Okay, so in level 2, at the very beginning, when we're first asking students to read and write, we're very careful that all of the words that we're asking them to read and write are within their ability to read and write. Okay, so that's the importance of one sound, one letter. So the 26 letters that they learned in level 1, in level 2, they're blending together, and they have to be of the level that the students are able to do that. So if we're asking them to read teacher or apple at this stage, it's very confusing and very difficult for the students in terms of decoding. So one-to-one correspondence, very important, especially at the early stages of early literacy. Okay? All right, and finally, not interfering. Teach, test, then get out of the way. Okay? So we start off with a story, teach the phonics, targets, communicative targets, play some games together, have the students do independent study, but at the very end, not interfering. We let the students read the story and find out the ending entirely on their own, empowering them to do that throughout the unit. All right, very important, key component of Oxford Phonics Worlds. Okay, so all of these together give us phonics in action. All right, so using the apps, a synthetic phonics approach, communication, tell a story, create interest through characters. All right, one-to-one correspondence, one letter, one sound, and not interfering. All right, thank you all very much. I hope you got something out of today's webinar. And as a final congratulations to all of you, I'd like to give you this certificate from Farmer Fred. I'm sorry Kai Schwermer couldn't make it today. And at the back of each book for your students, there is actually a certificate printed on heavy paper that you can write their names and sign as a reward for finishing each level of the course. Okay, so today's webinar was online and it was recorded, but I truly hope to be able to visit you in person and do a live workshop someday soon in the future. Thank you all very, very much and have a great fall. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Knowledge and learning underpin the progress we make as individuals and as a society. When we know more, we can solve new problems and explore fresh possibilities. For hundreds of years, Oxford University Press has been committed to sharing the best in human thinking. From a child reading their very first words to a researcher expanding the frontiers of their field, we passionately believe in the transformative power of knowledge and learning to inspire progress and realize human potential. But the world is changing. When all information is at our fingertips, data needs understanding. As content crowds every screen, ideas need space to breathe. And when the next great thinker can come from anywhere, they need to be seen. So Oxford University Press is changing too. Whether we're making learning work for anyone, anywhere, anytime, connecting a global community of English language learners, or helping influential ideas achieve greatest impact, we will meet the needs of education and research in new ways, with new ideas, for new audiences. For as long as the world keeps making progress, we will always be advancing knowledge and learning. Oxford University Press. Advancing knowledge and learning.